other, because we, oh, no, we're starting. We're live.
Okay.
Mike made the decision for us.
Okay.
Thank you guys so much for coming. We've been here a little over a year, so we love how many events we have. We probably like 3 or 4 a week, so please come to other ones. We'll do a quick, we'll do like a conversation between the two of you, then we'll do questions, and then we'll do a signing after. I don't like doing these introductions. They do make me nervous, but
Doing great.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're killing it.
But I didn't introduce the author yet. Ali, thank you so much for coming. We're so excited to celebrate this book. I'm a huge rom-com fan myself, as is my mom, and I did recommend this one to her. So
I brought my mom.
That. Oh, awesome. Cool. Hi. This is so great.
Love your dog.
Maureen, thank you so much for coming. Your book also did extremely well in our store when it came out. So we're super excited to have you both here. I will now put you out of your misery and turn you over to two people who can speak much more eloquently. But thank you guys so much for coming. We really appreciate it.
Okay, well, Ali, first of all, congratulations.
Thanks.
Happy Pub Week.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Wow.
I really enjoyed your book. I love the like New York and Ireland setting. So I guess I'll start by asking, like, you could have sent her anywhere, you could have sent Beatrice anywhere in the world.
Yes.
What made you choose Ireland?
I just think Ireland is so evocative and romantic. And if you're going to have a book where people are going back and forth from New York, it made sense from a time, from the time jump perspective of taking flights. But I also felt like it has that magical quality where, the book has a little bit of a friends with benefits. What happens in Ireland stays in Ireland moment. So I just felt like, and also her boss has a castle, which is a whole thing, but it's kind of based on a hotel that I'm obsessed with called Ashford Castle. So it was kind of just this beautiful place to sort of set a love story and then, put it between like the grittiness of New York. And come on, don't hide unless you need to escape, and then you can.
Yeah, I love that. And now I'm going to write down the name of that hotel.
It's in the back of the book.
So I can put it on my bucket list.
It definitely is. Yeah.
I also love with Beatrice, like, so much romance or rom-coms is often about like young 20-somethings.
Yes.
And I love that she is going through a divorce. She's a mom to a young child. What made you want to write a heroine that's got a little more life experience and some stressful stuff going on in her life?
I feel like there's so much amazing romance writing happening now. And I mean, I'm such a voracious reader first, but I do feel like women who are out of their 20s are not as well represented. And I think, I'm 38. I see a lot of my friends having quite a lot of relationship drama and things. And so I just think, there's often this like women are supposed to find themselves in their 20s and then maybe they have, after their kids grow up, they get these stories, but that kind of in-between period didn't seem to have as much. And so I liked the idea of having someone who had more of her life figured out and was sort of supposed to have had it figured out. She's a mother, she's an executive. But I think it just sort of spoke to the place where I am in my life and I see my friends. So I loved kind of setting it in that age range.
Yeah. And your hero, Jack, it's somebody that she had a relationship with when she was young, and they're kind of reconnecting, but a lot of old wounds there. Where did your vision for him come from?
Young Harrison Ford.
Oh,
had a lot of, my husband at a certain point was like, can we not with the Harrison Ford, like in his like early 30s pictures, like up here. No, I feel like we get a lot of these like dreamboat men in romance who sort of have their own issues, but they're either easily resolved or it's something to sort of be overcome. And, I think a lot of relationships, for them together, a lot of relationships don't necessarily have perfect people. There's these grand gestures that you see in romance, these sort of like perfectly imperfect men. And I think as much as I sometimes enjoy reading the fantasy of that, I enjoy writing characters that are a little bit more rooted in their own nonsense. And it's not necessarily that they have to become different people to be in love. It's just that they have to sort of allow themselves to be open to that. And so I felt like he was a good representation of not like the broody man who secretly then like becomes a really thoughtful, wonderful human in a way that I've never seen any man suddenly turn into. But that he's just in his own quiet way is already a thoughtful person, just in his way.
Mm-hmm. And I love Bash. That's your heroine's son.
Yeah.
You're a mom.
Yeah.
Is he based on your own kids?
He's completely based on my son. I just stole my son. I always just write. My son says like the funniest stuff to me. So I've always like written down what he says. And then I wanted to give her a child. And I finally I turned to my son. I was like, do you care if I take some of our conversations and just like put them in there? And he was like, that would be so now he's like gone through and like read it. He's like, this is something I would say. I'm like, okay. I'm like, because it was. But yeah, my son is 8. So I wrote this when he was 6. So it's a 6-year-old boy. And it was just really kind of lovely because I think, motherhood is also not necessarily portrayed in romance in the same kind of way. And we often see like the single mom or the single dad, that trope exists, but I wanted her issues are not with her son. It's just her son is sort of just like this delightful, wonderful piece of her life. And it's also, her marriage falls apart because of she and her husband dealt with a lot of infertility, which is something that I went through and I wanted to portray accurately. I feel like in a lot of romance, we see infertility and it's like, and then when you find love, your infertility problems are magically cured. And I also just didn't want that. And I feel like I've seen that even from some writers that I love. And so, I wanted to see someone who was a mother who'd been fulfilled, but had dealt with these things and was still sort of dealing with it. And the way that relationships can fall apart, not because someone's a hero or a villain, but just life gets in the way. So that complexity was sort of important to me. And again, for me, not necessarily every book that I want to read, but I think it's nice to sort of have those real pieces in there where they don't necessarily get resolved, but you still get your happy ending, as it were.
And I also really love that B is very much an ambitious career woman. Like the whole reason she's going to Ireland is because her boss has promised her a promotion if she agrees to go into Ireland like every 2 weeks, despite the fact that she has a young son.
Yeah.
And I love that your book acknowledges the challenges of that, but also doesn't like force her to compromise on her own ambitions or her dreams. And so can you talk a little bit about writing that? Because I feel like we don't get that a lot.
It's interesting. I mean, I feel like I keep saying these things as though I'm not like the most voracious romance reader who reads all the fantasy things. And I mean fantasy of like in contemporary romance. But, my first book had a job that's similar to mine where she writes recipes for a living. And I feel like that is a trope in general in romance of like the magazine, and I'm sure you see it like magazine, like the fun, like magazine.
People are always like, you made your villain a journalist? Yeah. I was like, it didn't even occur to me that was weird.
But you're like, but I see it all the time. Yeah. So I really wanted to write a book where the heroine's job is really like boring, like just a real job that people have. And I mean, it's an impressive job. She's vice president of business development in a tech company. She's a very impressive person, but it's not like, she's not a florist. She's not a baker. She's not some like, but she loves her job. And I feel like I know a lot of professional women who have these jobs that normally you don't see characters in novels get to have, but you can still really love your job if it's something a little bit more technical or something that's not. So the magic in the story comes from the love story and the setting in Ireland and all of the fun and the hijinks and that. But I wanted to have somebody whose job is really rooted in something serious and professional. And there's never a question to her of whether she's going to give it up for him, or do anything. I mean, that's not part of it at all. But it is, I think the struggles that we all have as we get older, prioritizing our life and how do we balance, her boss, she loves her boss, but her boss is quite rigid. So it's, it's how we balance those things and find the right lane for ourselves as we age and sort of come into ourselves, because I think we're always coming into ourselves. I don't think this like magic idea of like, and then you get married and you have a kid and suddenly you figured it all out. Like, I don't know anybody that has that.
Yeah. Another really fun thing in the book is that Bee's ex or soon to be ex sister-in-law lives with her
Yeah.
and is very much like calls out her brother Bee's ex-husband for his bullshit.
Yeah.
I love that. Where did that idea come from?
Female friendship to me, I mean, I think like my books will always be romances, but I think heart and soul at the center is always going to be female friendship, because that is, to me, like, I've been married a long time. That's my, whatever you want to call it, primary relationship, but I could not survive without my friends. And so I think friendships show up in many different ways. And I kind of loved the idea of having somebody who, had skin in the game, but was still on her side. And I think giving her somebody fun and interesting that was sort of connected in and understood all the pieces of it, where you wouldn't have to explain it. So yeah, it's her sister-in-law, and I gave them, they live in a townhouse that they all co-owned together, which obviously goes belly up when they get divorced. But so her sister-in-law moves in with her, and her ex-husband moves into the other apartment that the sister-in-law was living in. So it creates this kind of fun dynamic where she gets to sort of live with her best friend and her son, and they get to kind of like live in this fun apartment together in New York.
And as you mentioned, you have written some cookbooks, you write recipes, and food is still very important to the book. You have this scone recipe that's in the back. How do you broker that relationship between food and your characters in this story or in any story?
I think, like, writing is writing. So, I mean, writing cookbooks is still writing. It's just kind of a different process. But I think that food, I mean, listen, the way that we have seen sort of food content overtake culture is fascinating. And so I think you can tell a lot about character through food. I also think, like, in the Irish setting, I think a lot of people don't realize how incredible the foodways of Ireland are. So I really wanted to showcase that. And I also think a lot of important life happens over food. So a lot of the stuff that happens with her friends is over meals and over being together. And so I think food is just such an integral part of my life. So it is naturally going to show up and liven up stories that I tell. I mean, in the way that I think sometimes people write about clothes or location or, things that sort of make people characters. I think what they eat, how they go out to eat, how they manage their life around food is always going to showcase a piece of your character. If it's not important to you, that also showcases a piece of your character, right? I mean, I think people who find food totally uninteresting, like, that also says something about you. Neither good nor bad, just
something.
Just something. Yeah, it gives a little piece of your character.
Yeah. I love that you say that about Ireland, because I'm always raving about Irish and British food, and people think I'm insane.
It's such a it's such a bad stereotype.
It really is.
I mean, first of all, like, if you love cheese and dairy, there is no better place on earth.
So true.
If you love seafood, I mean, I was sort of, the first time I went to Ireland, sort of shocked by how incredible the seafood was. And yeah, like, you don't have to like Irish soda bread. I certainly do not. But I mean, I just think also the innovation in restaurants and, local farming and products. I was so delighted by it the first time that I went. And I think it really doesn't get as much attention as it deserves. So it's kind of fun to showcase that and have people think, like, well, this isn't something here. And it's like, but it is, so yeah.
I'm curious, being both a recipe writer and a romance writer, if you subscribe to the belief that through the stomach is the way to a person's heart.
Oh yeah. I mean, again, depending on the person, but absolutely. I mean, and I think, people always get so weird about whether, like, I'm not a cook. And it's like, well, it doesn't have to be like, you don't have to create a masterpiece. I mean, sometimes it's like sourcing really good ingredients and creating like an amazing board of food or products, or, finding like, oh, we went to this place in Ireland, we found the best butter, and now I'm going to do a thing of like Irish butter and cheese and make that, into a dinner. I mean, I think that you can show so much love through food and the thoughtfulness around food. So to me, it's kind of, I mean, not a spoiler, but at one point, like, Jack hands Bea a scone when he kind of sees that she's like a little hangry, and it sort of throws her off because they did have this past together, but they don't know each other. They haven't seen each other in many years. And I think like everyone knows, you know, it's like the subtext, like you don't have to lay out that subtext for a reader. People know, like somebody remembering your food preferences is a special loving thing, you know? So I think we can sort of show through the way people feed each other or notice each other's eating habits. I mean, I feel like I see in romance all the time, like, oh my God, he remembered my coffee order. You know? Like, and I think that it is meaningful to us because we all have our little preferences. We all have our sort of little things that we like and latch onto. So it is kind of like a lovely way to show somebody cares by sort of recognizing their food things.
Yeah.
Because we're also influenced by food.
Now this is a more personal question because you asked me to join you tonight. And so I'm just curious why.
Can we get into the impact that Entertainment Weekly has had on my life? Like, first of all, when I was a kid, like I grew up in South Carolina and like getting EW in the mail was like the great moment of my life. So many of like the posters and things on my wall. And then I have to say, I mean, not only your book, which everyone should get Maureen's book because it is like screwball comedy in book form, which nobody else is writing in that genre. I loved it. But also I feel like there is so little for people who love books to find romance being celebrated as a real literary genre. And I feel like if you know, it's like in the New York Times, it's like one column once a month that like they leave out, you know, if you see book reviews in places, it's never the stuff on the bestseller. I mean, that's what's sort of hilarious. It's like people love stories about love. They love happy endings. They love complex women. They love stories about women. And yet in media, it's almost like unless someone has made a movie about it, it does not get coverage. And I just adore that you are so unapologetically bringing people romance. I mean, it's and seeing it as equal to other genres, because I think no matter how much Emily Henry and Abby Jimenez sit at the top of the bestseller list, like it just doesn't get coverage. And when it does get coverage, it's always in this, like, not to call out, you know, other magazines, but like the New York Magazine did a profile of Emily Henry that was like, let me tell you about, like, she's transformed the romance genre. And it's like, what? Like, you know, and the bodice ripper. It's like, what are you talking about? This is incredible literature that just happens to have a happy ending, you know?
And I get so annoyed with that too, because then the readers of pieces like that will attack someone like Emily for saying, like, how dare you paint yourself this way? And it's like, she didn't do that. This journalist who didn't do their basic research did that. Yell at them.
And this journalist who like wants to paint it as though like this is the only book like this that exists. And it's like, people who read romance, especially, like, I am someone who reads like 60 to 100 books a year, right? Like, there is so much room.
And some people are reading like 500 books a year, which blows my mind.
I mean, I feel like in LA, it's like the audiobook people, like, mazel to all of you, because that you just like have to live in traffic. But it's like, I just find this idea of like one writer has to be has to be the queen of and it's like, I mean, I could name for you 50 writers in this genre that I think are brilliant, incredible, masterful writers, and it just doesn't get covered. So you are just one of the only journalists that are treating romance with the respect that it deserves, frankly. And so when I was like, I'm coming to LA, I was like, I am asking. Yeah, we had not met. Like, I was just like, I'm obsessed with your writing and I love you. And like, you came out this week, and I mean, you wrote about Kate Claiborne, who's one of my all-time favorite writers.
Amazing.
And wrote a blurb for this book, and I almost died because I was just like, I love you so much. You know, the way that you wrote about her, of how she brings such humanity to regular people, it was so beautiful, because I felt like you were seeing her writing in the way that so many of her fans do, and that you only ever see in like Goodreads commentary, you know, or like on Bookstagram. And to see that, you know, given pride of place in a publication, I just think doesn't happen to the extent that it does. And I mean, one of the things that I love about what Zibby has done, and really one of the things that I just adore about her, is this, like, she doesn't have genre preference. You know, she doesn't place one type of writing over the other. She doesn't make people feel like whatever they enjoy reading is somehow better or worse. You know, whatever you enjoy is what it should be. And there's great, fabulous writing in every genre. And we're just so lucky to live in an era with such great writing. So anyway, you asked a very simple question, and that's my that's me pouring my heart out of just how thrilled I am to be with you.
Oh, well, that's very sweet of you. And now I have a perhaps more complicated, but maybe more brief question, which is, I know that you, like me, are a Swiftie.
Yes.
So if you had
I
to
love
give
this.
alternate endings a Taylor Swift song, what Taylor Swift song would it be?
Ooh, well, because I'm living in my tortured poets department era at the moment, I mean, I think I Can Do It With a Broken Heart. It has to be that, right? I mean, I have been listening to that so much.
I say that I feel like it was like written for Joan. Like,
yes.
I'm like,
yes.
did you read the book? And also, if you did, can you have someone option it?
Right. Can you buy my book?
But,
I saw that Taylor today has copyrighted Female Rage, the musical. So I'm very excited about that. But yeah, I mean, I cry a lot, but I am so productive is like the line of my life. And I feel like that coming out now and seeing that, I was like, oh, this is really for B as well, because she is so productive. She is such an impressive woman. And yet she's crying a lot, she's dealing with a lot. And I think it's amazing to me, like when you see, not that anybody has to speak on the power of Taylor Swift, because obviously she has proven everything, but it's amazing also to see what songs, when she releases an album, like what songs are not the lead songs that then climb up the charts. And it was amazing where I'm like, there's a lot of productive, sad women out here who are relating to that, who are like really just pushing themselves and feeling inspired to do things even when things are tough. And so, that's her era.
I love that too, because I feel like the fact that women tend to be bigger criers than men, that's a very broad stereotype, but like it's so weaponized against us.
Yes.
Like we can't direct movies or be president because we cry too much. And so I love that like sort of statement of like, yes, and like, I cry a lot, but I'm also
so
very productive.
It's an art. I mean, just like, oh, it's just so like, I know she writes lines where I'm like, oh, I wish I wrote that. That would be great. Like it would just be great if I could come up with those quips.
Somebody needs to make a Taylor Swift cross stitch book, because I feel like all of her lyrics are
like that.
Perfect for that.
Yeah, but I think that's really the other thing that I love about romance is it allows women to have those multitudes, and it's been interesting because I feel like people in the cookbook space and in the food space they're like, what do you mean you're going to keep doing food stuff and you're writing fiction? Whereas I feel like people in the fiction space, first of all, because writers tend to have other jobs, everyone's like, ooh, well that, like you contain multitudes. It's like, that's what we learn through romance, right? Like women can contain multitudes and be many things and do many things. And so it's really special to sort of being a part of this community as a reader, and then getting to sort of be in it as an author has been so special, because it really is just filled with women who are impressively doing many things, and then also writing books that make my heart so happy.
Definitely. Well, I think that was our Q&A or our conversation time, and we can now switch over to Q&A with the audience. So
who has questions?
Any questions?
Or who just wants to talk about books?
Yeah.
I feel like you can.
Anybody?
So quiet.
How was this process writing this book compared to any of your others?
Well, it was really nice because knowing that I was being paid to write it rather than writing it like at night in between work, that was really, really nice. I also feel like having an editor who getting feedback. I mean, I'm somebody who in the realm of I'm so productive. Like I love feedback. Like I just think I sort of feel like it's cheating of like, oh my God, someone's going to tell me how to make this better. Like, and I get the credit for it. Like that's amazing, So when I was writing Recipe for Second Chances, when I started, it was like I was sort of like in my own little world of like, I'm going to try this thing and not tell anyone. And with this book, it was a little bit more like, I'm going to let some people in and let people read it. And so getting that, I mean, again, to the power of like women helping each other and doing things for each other. It was so amazing to me to sort of get that feedback. So yeah, writing, yeah, it's delightful to be like, I can now write, I just turned in my third book, which is, as we were talking about before, the process goes, so far in advance, but it's delightful to be like, I can take time out of my schedule to do this because it's a job now, not just a fun thing that I hope someone reads.
And it is so nice knowing you're going to get that feedback. Like, I feel like just writing without an editor looking at it, it just feels like you're blindly swimming in the dark, and it's really hard to know, how to fix something without somebody giving you that outside perspective.
Right. So I always start with like I'll send it to a few friends and be like, and I'm very lucky to have some honest friends who are just like, absolutely not. No, like you need to change this or you need to do this. And then it gets into its better form. And then hopefully by the time you send it to the editor, then it's clear enough where they can be like, okay, here's where to shift and make this better and hit these points home. And because, I think a lot of people pick up a book and it sort of looks like this book. I mean, a really great book, you shouldn't feel the seams, right? Like you shouldn't know that it was edited. It sort of feels like it should just have flowed out of the person as was, but it didn't. I don't know any writer who's ever been able to accomplish that. So it's so much of trying to strike the right balance and have every word count, even when you're trying to hold so many words in your head. So,
What was it that took you to Ireland that allowed you to get this inspiration?
Just travel. I mean, I went to college in Scotland, so I had been to Ireland a few times because, when you're in college and it's like, what flights are cheap to a different place? And then I went a few years ago, to this hotel called Ashford Castle that you've been. I mean, it's just amazing. It's just like I was, and somebody when I was there told me that Ireland has more castles than anywhere else on earth because during like the Norman invasion, everything was very dangerous. So people had to build a lot of castles for like protective measures. So a lot of people, not a lot of people, but I mean, people can buy and live in castles in Ireland in a way that perhaps the availability is not the same in other places. So it kind of set up this idea of like, oh, like this would be a realistic
Irish castles are cheaper than a condo in Santa Monica.
Yeah.
Just saying.
I mean, I know. It's like, do you follow any of those like real estate accounts where it's like, an apartment in New York versus like a castle in Ireland?
Maybe I should move to the middle of Ireland and live in a castle.
Right. But it would be very drafty.
It would.
Yeah. But I mean, for me, it was just, it had always struck me as such a beautiful, romantic, kind of magical place. And I also, again, it's like finding a place to silo people where it's away from their life, can give you perspective. And I just, I love to write about travel in my books, but I don't necessarily want it to be like, and then we're on vacation in this place. Like I liked the idea of sort of a permanent place that they could keep going back to. So Ireland just felt, and I mean, really like flight times. I mean, trying to think of.
I'm so jealous of that.
I know, from New York
pipeline.
Sorry, but I'm jealous that you guys can go to Hawaii.
I'd rather go to Europe.
Yeah.
There's a lot more options. Hawaii gets repetitive after a while.
Yeah, but I mean, Asia, Australia. I mean, you guys are closer in that. It's still far, but it's still very far. But it's. I mean, it's funny because I was like, how can you have this woman who has a child and have her going somewhere that feels like a total escape, but also she could realistically not be gone for more than 2 days and actually make that a functioning reality because, you don't want to think of her as like a bad mother. Not that you would be a bad mother if you had to travel for work for longer, but I think so Ireland just checked every box in such a delicious way that it was like the natural place for it.
Yeah.
Without spoiling anything, because I haven't read it yet, do you have a favorite like
Ooh, there is a scene where our lovely main characters are in bed. Not spoiler to say, obviously they end up together because it's the premise of the book.
You can also spoil something.
Yeah, I mean, there's sex in the book. People have sex. Yeah. You know, they talk about this like tart at a restaurant in New York that I love, this like lemon tart. And I just, again, it's kind of what you're saying through food, like the idea that this man would have like thought so deeply about this like lemon tart. But it's also like a tart that I have spent a lot of time contemplating. So, like I mean, obviously, like I love all the like romantic moment, you know, but as like a non-spoilery thing, I love this description of this. I love, there's one flashback. There's, you know, this book is a second chance romance, and it is, they dated in high school, but it's not really that important in the sense of like, they're both adults and it was a long time ago, but I did want to give them like one little flashback scene of like to their first kiss. And it's just like really sweet and adorable. And it like, you know, and it has, for anyone who's a Swiftie, there's a couple little Swiftian Easter eggs. Yeah, it's just sweet. You know, I don't think I could ever write YA because I love, I like adults and I like sex. Oh, hi. Sorry, that's my friend. Hi. If you buy my first cookbook, you'll see that lovely lady. Fun facts, Easter eggs. But yeah, I don't think I could write YA. I think I would find it boring and impermanent and all of those things. But I did enjoy kind of writing this like teenage little, just like all of those feelings of like, oh, I like someone and I don't think they like me. Like it made me so happy.
I love that you say that, because when this was several years ago now, but when Meg Cabot wrote the adult entry to the Princess Diaries, which were YA books, I asked her like, why did you want to write an adult Princess Diaries? Why not just another YA entry? And she was like, so I could put sex in the book. Obviously.
Yeah, like I enjoy. I just, you know, listen, like I think that those are such different categories, and I just don't, it's not as interesting to me as a writer.
Sure.
I think some writers find that fascinating. I know a lot of adult readers love reading YA. I'm also not, I mean, sometimes I can dip my toe in, but it's not what I enjoy reading. So I would like to write books that are the kind of books that I want to read. So it's not for me. And also like, I'm not sure I want to mentally put myself back in that space. Yeah. Like I would like to leave that behind, very much behind. But yeah, I did enjoy the channeling of like that moment when you're on the precipice of like, does somebody like me? And I think they might, but I'm not quite sure. And I just think that's like, you know, everything else around it, I don't want to write because it was also horrifying to live through. But I think that little moment is just like so cute, delightful. Yeah, it's so cute.
So I mean, I'm writing a book as well.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And I'm trying to kind of assess how to get to the point where we get to the happy ending.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking obviously there has to be some catalyst for change, right?
Yeah.
So how did you come up with your catalyst in this book?
You know, it's interesting. I would say that if you look at people who don't like my book, if you look at like people will say like, it's like nothing dramatic happens, you know? And I think that's been a choice for me. That's the type of books that I like to read. You know, I think there's books where there's sort of internal motivations and external motivations, right? Like something dramatic happens and it moves people along. And obviously you need some external things to happen, but I like stories, especially about women, where the change is internal, you know, where women have to sort of find themselves and accept the pieces of themselves in order to be able to move forward. So sometimes I think the catalyst can be many little things. And I don't think you have to create a dramatic, like, and then, you know, she falls off the building and he's actually Spider-Man and catches her and takes, I mean, like those stories are great and I love them, but I also think you have to stay true to what you enjoy reading, because not everyone is going to like what you, I mean, some of the books that I think of as like the great, like Kate Claiborne is a great, I mean, to go back, like there are people who hate her. I mean, her books, if you look on Goodreads, like their ratings are pretty insane to me, because it's like, give her all the stars, but like people don't like, they're like, well, it's slow and it's very internal and it's a lot of thinking and feeling. And it's like, well, but I like reading that. Not everyone does. So, I mean, I think Like, it's okay if your instinct is not like to have this like one big wham catalyst. Like, I think that's okay. If that's what you like reading and that's what you enjoy, like, to me, I think the best advice ever for a writer is just like keep reading and then think about like, what is it about this book that I like? What is it about this book that I don't like? You know, there are some books where someone's like, you have to read this, and I don't love it. I mean, there are some, like, I don't like when something could be solved with a 5-minute phone call. And there are some very popular books that have that I read and I want to like throw the book across the room. And then, you know, it's like these people didn't talk for a year and it was, so they all like, you know, she wept and was miserable. And then it's like, I'm like, that was the thing. Like, that's what I hate that as a reader, but some people like that, like the tortured year where they were apart and the misery. So it's like, you have to see what you like because, you know, and it's, I don't know. So I think like finding that catalyst, it's really like making it earned, whatever it is, but it can be, you know, the story can have room. And I like writing it where it's sort of longer because I just think that's how it happens in real life. I mean, it's very rare that suddenly it's like, you know, like the Clueless, like, wait a minute, I love Josh, you know, like that. You know, like that's for you. You know, I don't think that's how most people come to things. And I mean, maybe you have those realizations, but it's usually earned. Yeah. So to me, but again, that's my writing and not everyone likes that about my writing. So.
And I will say, like, because I have a very dramatic third act breakup.
Yours is set in Hollywood.
Yes.
Like,
so, but I think one thing that's
it's a
really
breakup that makes sense. It's not like,
Right.
oh, they miscommunicated about one thing.
well, and I feel like if the miscommunication is matched by a like good rationale internally for why they're miscommunicating, then I don't mind it. Because it's like, well, obviously they didn't feel comfortable communicating about this for X, Y, and Z reason. But what I was going to say is like,
that's not a miscommunication. That's a choice to miscommunicate. You know what I mean? That's, to me, like in a different category.
but I would say, like, as someone who does have like these big external forces, you can have all of the like plot points and external catalysts in the world, but if they aren't accompanied by that internal change and that, what Ali was saying, earning it, then it doesn't matter how dramatic or exciting those external forces are, because it's not true to like who these people are at their core. So I would say, whether or not you choose to have that big external factor, that you always have to be sort of reflecting on what's going on in the interior of these people's lives.
Yeah, and also just like let people read it, I think is the other thing. Like, just write it and then have your, like, find your most honest friends.
Right.
And then just be okay with, like, get your most honest people and have them tell you, like, this didn't hit for me. And that's okay. Like, it doesn't mean it's not good. It just means it's not there yet. Like, that's, you know, I think every writer, like, you go through stages with, I mean, in my last book, in Recipe for Second Chances, like, the second to last chapter was not written until like very well into, you know, it was like, you know, she didn't really resolve this thing with her sister and whatever. And I was like, yeah, but I want to like I was like, I want to get to like the happy ending. I want to get there. And, you know, my editor was like, it just doesn't hit right. And I started writing it and I was like, now I look back at it, I'm like, how could I not have had this chapter where she sort of resolves the stuff for herself before dealing with her crap? I mean, it's just, you know, sometimes you don't see it until you're in it. So you just have to write it and then let people read it and then revise. Yeah.
I think too, if you're saying like, I'm worried that the happy ending doesn't feel earned, can you tell me if it does to you or not? Then you'll also have specific feedback back that you're asking your readers to look out for if there's something that you're feeling like really at sea about.
Yeah. And talk about people as though they're real people. Like, I like to get on the phone with friends and be like, I feel like Beatrice is just being really like, I can't figure her out in this moment. Like, talk about them like they're real people.
I know.
Because they become real people to
They
you.
do. Joan and Dash feel so real to me now.
Yeah. And it's like, where are you?
Yeah.
You know, like, where?
You should make your food characters. I keep thinking that, like, if you're so, like, kind of mingling the food with it, like, who are the people that pick the scones? Like, how they grab them? Do they, like, almost like the food being the character?
Yeah. I mean, and it definitely speaks to the characters, you know, because I think we all have that. I mean, and it's sort of funny, like the way I feel like in every book, like the way people eat food, like the book that I just turned in, it's like they're both like carb fiends, you know, and it's like the way that they like, you sort of see them come together through love of carbs is really delightful. So yeah, I just think, you know, yeah. If you can't tell, I like baked goods. And I enjoy having my characters eat a lot of baked goods. Very important. And gelato.
Yeah.
Gelato is important.
So good.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
Any other questions?
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. This was great.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
4 books up front if anyone's looking to purchase. We can do a book signing as well.
Thanks.
Yeah. Do you prefer Sharpie or
Love a
I brought my
Sharpie.
own pen. That's